Welcome back to Nationwide, where our stories are of the waters and the wild. Here in Ireland, a lot of wildlife conservation work goes on in the background with results not visible for years. Inland Fisheries Ireland is the state body responsible for increasing the number of salmon in our rivers. And our reporter, Niall Martin, went out to see the salmon conservation programme in action.
The Corrib in Galway. One of the best salmon rivers in Europe, bang slap in the middle of a city.
It's a fabulous place. It's one of the finest fisheries in Ireland. You know, there's a run of about 15,000 salmon, wild salmon here every year, which is fabulous for a city like Galway to have that run of salmon coming back. It's fabulous to see in the summer, in June and July. You get hundreds of people looking over the Samway Bridge at the salmon spread out on the way upstream, so it's a fabulous sight.
This beautiful Victorian watchtower was once the centre of the commercial salmon fishery in Galway. Now, the Fisheries Museum, the watchtower provided an ideal vantage point to watch out for poachers and salmon alike.
Well, this is a very interesting window. It had a very specific purpose. Basically, when they were draft netting, and the draft netting station is down below here, the watchman up here was watching as the tide came up. Fish would come up ahead of the tide sometimes. In the meantime, the watchman could see the shoal of fish coming, so he would shout down to the people on the slipway to put the boat out on the net.
Commercial salmon fishing ended in Galway in 1997, and since then it's all been about conservation for sports angling.
The farm is one of the things now that you can buy most times now. Like everything else in heretofore, it was a seasonal situation where when the salmon season opened you had fresh wild salmon. Most people now have to, I'm afraid, fish for salmon themselves if they want to get a taste of wild fish. The commercial aspect now has been completely scaled back in a lot of places. So if you want to taste wild salmon in these days, you have to catch your own as such.
Today we're out with the conservation team at Inland Fisheries Ireland, who are tagging the juvenile salmon known as smolts. First they're dropped into water containing an anaesthetic, then they're measured and tagged.
We got a biggie. Index catchment. Yeah, this is a big, nice big size salmon smolt for here, so he's about just over 21 centimetres. We tag 2,000 wild salmon smolts every year. We're just inserting the tag under the skin into the body cavity, and that will heal nice and quick and won't affect the salmon as he grows. So it's the same technology people use to tag clothes in supermarkets, really. So it's just there's a little magnet in the tag, and when it passes the detector it just gets energized, and we know exactly which fish we've tagged, so down to the individual fish, so we can know what size it is when we tagged it, and then if we are lucky to get it back when it comes back to the Corrib here, we know what size it is when it comes back then after that, so we can see the difference in the growth when it's been out at sea.
These guys, when they hatch, their eggs take about 3 months to hatch, whereas a predator like the pike takes 28 days. So they're 2 months ahead of the game already. And they have huge numbers as well compared to these. These guys would have about, 500 eggs to the pound, whereas the pike would have, up to 10,000. So it's huge.
Over the lockdown period, Fisheries Officer Kevin Crowley set about filming the majestic salmon in the different stages of their life cycle.
The story starts up in the headwaters. The female salmon lays their eggs in the gravel beds around Christmas time. The eggs are covered in gravel, the oxygenated water flows through, and then for about 3 months they'll stay under the gravel until they hatch. And for about 2 years they'll stay in the river as par. Little camouflaged salmon fry, feeding on insects such as mayfly larvae and stonefly larvae and caddis flies. And then around April, May time, at about 2 years old, they're going to move to sea. And that's the smolts that we see that Paddy and Mick tagging here today.
17.8.
Those fish then take about a year, spend a year at sea, most of them. Some will take 2 or 3 years. But most fish come back as grilse or one sea winter fish after 1 year at sea. they're coming back then up the fishery here, and the anglers are targeting them then and providing great sport. Fishery here is very important, but also Lough Corrib up above is one of the most famous trout fisheries in the world and draws anglers from all over, especially the UK and especially in May when the mayfly are hatching. So it's very important to the rural economy.
The salmon come back now, they're not coming back as plentiful as they were. There's only about 5% survival now for those smolts that we were tagging this morning, about 15 centimetres. They've lived for 2 years. They go to sea and only about 5% of them survive now, as opposed to 15% survived in the 1980s and early 90s. It's largely due to changes in the ocean, increased water temperature, changes in food webs. The salmon aren't surviving as well. They're having to travel further north to get the same food. Some of the plankton species they fed on, the abundant nutritious plankton, has been replaced with warmer temperatures by less nutritious plankton. So the whole food web change in the ocean, warming oceans, has affected salmon survival.
The first salmon caught when the season opens in February is still a big deal.
Tell me, you've had some success over the years then with using shrimp.
Yeah, very successful. I've caught the first salmon on numerous occasions on it. In the pool down there. Generally speaking, the first salmon is caught in the pool here on shrimp. Originally it would be normally pink or yellow shrimp, but lots of people dye them to like their own colours. But this is the one I generally use myself. I find it most successful.
There's great pride in getting that first salmon, isn't there?
But it is, you know. Last year I caught him on my birthday. Don't ask me what birthday it was, but it was great. Yeah, and the year before I just missed it out by a day catching it. But of course, if you're fishing a place a long time, you know it like the back of your hand. I'm fishing all my life here.
Dr. Paddy Gargan has just retired from Inland Fisheries Ireland, knowing that the angling community has bought into the idea of catch restrictions and throwbacks.
In Ireland now there's actually more salmon being caught and released than killed. And anglers can take a few fish, but generally there is a trend towards conservation and catch and release. The whole idea is to help rehabilitate the rivers, and some rivers were drained and there are now schemes to put in gravel and little weirs and have them producing more juvenile fish, because those wild fish survive to a far greater extent than hatchery fish. The hatchery fish don't know how to avoid predators, and their survival is much less. It's less than 1% as opposed to 5-6% for wild fish. So the focus now is rehabilitating rivers, ensuring that water quality is good so that it's self-sustaining. If the estimate is that there's enough salmon to meet the spawning target, then the river can be open for taking some salmon. Anglers in Ireland, if they buy a national licence over the season, could take 10 fish, but you generally find they may take a few fish and then return the rest. And it's all about the sport now, and there's very good survival of salmon. We've done studies, tagging studies, to show that if the fish are handled properly, you'll get 96-97% survival of those released fish.
An interesting look there at the work of Inland Fisheries Ireland. And hopefully our journey along the waterways this evening has been informative and may encourage us to have a deeper appreciation of our rivers and lakes. That brings us to the end of this evening's Nationwide. From all of us on the team, bye-bye. On next Monday's Nationwide, on World Mental Health Day, we meet a proud South Hill Limerick man who brings us on a journey down memory lane and tells us of his love of his home place.